Hi everyone, welcome to 90-Degree Turns, where we expand the minds, beliefs, perspectives of the collective and awaken the sleeping many from their slumber. I'm your host, Trisha. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Douglas Fleckman. Hi Douglas, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So can you please tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm a clinical nutritionist, and I'm in private practice, and I believe in the mind-body connection, and I do consultations with people in reference to nutrition, lifestyle, and also their health and their wellness and their lifestyle.
Okay. So could you maybe tell our audience the difference between like a nutritionist and something like a dietitian?
Dietitian.
A dietitian?
Yeah. Well, a dietitian is in school for 4 years and then takes an internship, and then practices normally either in private practice or in public nutrition or in food service or in food science.
Okay.
So, in fact, I went through the 4-year school, I have a degree in human nutrition and foods, but elected not to go out and do the dietitian process, even though my organization, I'm a certified clinical nutritionist. Mm-hmm. And my organization was grandfathered into the state of New York as a dietitian nutritionist.
Okay.
So I do have a license in New York City, which doesn't do much for me out of state, mm-hmm. around the country.
Okay. So when you look at human history, do you see that there's like a pivotal point from where people kind of went to looking at food as being kind of the healing medicine, and that's kind of what they turned to? And now kind of our society, at least in the United States, seems to be very focused on kind of just putting a Band-Aid on any kind of illness and not really bringing a true solution to it. And we're very, it seems, dependent on pharmaceuticals, pharmaceutical drugs, and things of that nature. So can you kind of walk us through how we kind of went from being a very kind of just homegrown kind of society to now we're very pharmaceutical based?
Yes. I would say back in earlier times, there was a lot of herbology practiced, mm-hmm. and home remedies in the process, and slowly over time, that power, it goes back a long way. It has to do with educational process in the colleges and the universities, the Prussian system of bells and lines and waiting in line and sitting in one seat for X amount of time, schedules. And so slowly what happened is that there was built an allopathic medical model, which is basically what we have today. That's a doctor diagnosing and treating a specific diagnosis and spending a very little bit of time with the patient. And in the older times, you would have a shaman or a herbologist or a healer of the community that people would go to, and they would spend time with them, talk to them, look at their emotional state, look at their life stress, physical problems, the ailments, what was actually going on, what was surrounding, how did they come to be sitting in front of the healer asking for advice, mm-hmm. or help with an issue for their health. And so that slowly became and if you think in terms of way back, the earlier doctors didn't even wash their hands going from surgery to delivering a baby. And so slowly over time, and the doctors resisted washing their hands. So, but as time goes on and money and power, I would say, begins to take over, then the shamans or the healers, possibly because of the church, possibly because of the money influence, whatever happened, they began to be called, witches or doing witchcraft.
To kind of demonize them.
Demonize them, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
A beautiful term, demonize them. And in that process, what happens is that they were slowly pushed back, or in severe cases, hung or burned at the stake. And then slowly they were pushed out as the more allopathic, as the more of medicine as we know it today came into being. Now, gunshot wound, staph infection, broken bone, you go see a doctor. You know, I mean, we need antibiotics, we need surgeries, we need setting bones, etc.
Modern medicine is still
Modern
needed.
medicine there. But I think in terms of building a bridge between the allopathic medical model and the complementary model, which is based on diet and lifestyle. I mean, what we eat, what we drink, what we think, and what we do all affects these body temples that we're living in. And so in that, looking at it in that way, taking one pill, we'll say medication, for one symptom is only treating, like putting a Band-Aid over the issue, although it may help, but it's not getting at the foundational cause of how the individual got into this dis-ease of the body and what's reacting. So I'm looking more into the foundational approaches, and what I found out in this process that emotional trauma, this was according to my teacher, and it took me about 20 years to prove him wrong, is that, or prove me wrong and him right, is that emotional trauma precedes every weakness in the body 99.9% of the times. So that somehow, as far out as it may sound, somehow we attract into our life even situations where the universe is trying to give us a message to wake up. And it might be just a very tiny knock on the door, it's faint. Wake up, wake up. And then, you know, if we pay attention, then we alter our lifestyle, our thinking, our diet, whatever, or address the trauma. But if we don't pay attention, then the universe starts knocking a little louder. Boom, boom, boom. And then it may knock even louder if we don't listen, you know, bang.
You're banging on the door, so you have to make a change of some sort.
Where we have tremendous upsets, tremendous chaos going on in our life, which is all goes back and is connected with the mind and the body and how stress presents itself. So as we get more into the more natural way of looking at how people handle stress, then we can see that, I mean, when I do practicing with people and take their history and talk with them, there's almost always a loss, a trauma, some sort of tragedy, a divorce, bankruptcy, loss of a parent.
Like a trigger.
A trigger that precedes the weakness, the body going into the dis process. And then, so I'm always looking for the foundation. That's why I have kind of stepped away from the clinical nutrition world into this life, health, and wellness consultations and coaching, because I'm looking for the foundational piece of what is not going on, what is not right. And so I take like a homeopathic history from people sometimes, and we go back from birth to the present time, because we're looking for keynotes in the homeopathic, classical homeopathic world. We're looking for keynote experiences that left a mark or trauma on our physiology. Mommy and daddy, that's where it all begins. It begins in the womb. If some people think it even precedes the womb in past life, if you believe that, you know, we don't know, I guess, until we've had our experiences or been there. It's an individual choice. So I'm looking for those foundational pieces that what upset this physiology and put stress on the individual.
Wow. So you really do look at kind of the person as a whole. You're not looking at just kind of tunnel vision to one thing. It's just the entire thing. Their trauma, their current lifestyle, their diet, I'm sure.
I look at their diet, their trauma.
Their relationships all around, because that makes up a human, right? You have all the different bodies. You have your physical body, emotional body, astral body, spiritual body, and it all makes up a human being.
Yeah, absolutely, and including the environment that we live in. I mean, we are out here in the outdoors in these beautiful trees, Lemurian Hill, and it's just lovely, and the energy is beautiful. However, when we go back into our office world and the business world, or our homes, we have now Wi-Fi. So we have, in our environment, we have overhead lights, we have electromagnetic frequencies that affect our physiology. And now they're wanting to go from 4G to 5G, which is going to be...
They are already starting.
They're already going to 5G. And if you know what you do and you put a steak in the oven, in a microwave oven, put a piece of steak or meat in a microwave oven, it comes out
different, definitely.
Different.
It's transformed. With radiation.
Dry, because it dehydrates. And as a population, I would say we don't get enough water to begin with. So we're exposed to more electromagnetic frequencies. We're exposed to, putting clock radios next to our head while we sleep at night, our cell phones, and we're just, putting it up against our ear. I mean, there are ways to mitigate that, but one has to really take care of these body temples. I keep using that word, and you'll hear me use it many times, because it all starts with this, with the flesh, with the meat body, in a sense of how do we take care of that to be able to handle all the stresses, both, as you mentioned, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, environmental as well, and artificial lighting, the sun. I mean, how do we use those to our advantage, or how do we protect from the bad frequencies, so to speak?
So, in your experience, what would you suggest? Because 4G is everywhere essentially. 5G, they're starting to build it up a lot of places. Some people are kind of rebelling against 5G, and so they're asking their communities and their local communities to not put these 5G towers up. What do you suggest for people who are quite energy sensitive to those kind of frequencies?
Well, I kind of, it's hard to pinpoint, because we all have a different biochemical fingerprint. So there's no two of us that are alike, just like there's no fingerprint alike. So some people can, eat, drink, smoke, whatever, and they're fine. Other people are extremely sensitive. They're sensitive to smells, they're sensitive to vibrations, etc. So it really depends on the individual. However, I mean, basic things, like drinking water, drinking some clean water, staying hydrated, eating less sugar in the diet, maybe taking less caffeine in the body.
Do you mean processed sugar, or also like stay away from fruits because they have natural sugars
No,
too?
the fruits, no, you're right. The fruits, because as we chew a fruit, we're getting a slow release of sugar from the fiber into our system. In the old schools used to say, chew 50 times before you swallow.
Oh.
Drink your solids and chew your liquids. That was an old term used. So now I ask people to do 25 chews before they swallow, but rarely. I mean,
that's some mindful eating there. You're just gonna have a lot of time spent just really enjoying your meal.
Yeah, you go out to a restaurant and you look around. Everybody's got their cell phone. They're doing this. They're not. We're not present. Communing, and they're not present. To life. So chewing your food well, eating healthy types of foods, making good food choices, and sugar is okay. A little is medicine, too much is no good, and none is no good. So life has to be enjoyed. So you have to have a little bit of sweetness in life.
There definitely should be a balance, because one extreme or the other, it's never gonna be. It's gonna be too much one way or the other, right?
Exactly.
So a balance, a fine balance, is important. So I feel like in the general community, there tends to be kind of I'd say a lot of people are going like vegan, and they're seeing the health benefits from that. Do you find that that is like the way to go, or would you say that there's not really a one-size-fits-all way of eating? Is it kind of you should just go intuitively and eat whatever you feel is right for your body? Because everybody is different, right? Like like you said, we're all individual, like little blueprints. We all are very unique.
We're all unique, and I feel like it's like you use your body as a laboratory, and you see what works for you. And I think I was relating, or I was talking about to another. Well, it may have been you, about William Kelly, who had something like 70 plus documented cases of pancreatic cancer cured in the United States. He was a dentist in Dallas, Irvine Texas, Grapevine, Texas, and he found out that although he cured himself of pancreatic cancer with vegetarian diet, he helped a number of people with a vegetarian diet, doing juicing, doing all sorts of like the Gerson therapies, etc., juicing, etc. And but he had a patient that it wasn't working, and he was losing this individual. And he began to try. He got away from the vegetarian. He started mixing in some animal protein, and even to the extreme. You know, a combination of vegetarian and animal protein. Nothing helped. It's only when he went extremely to raw meat, 3 times a day.
Truly?
Truly. It's documented. I mean, there's stories that's written up. One of his students is a medical doctor by the name of Gonzalez, and he has passed away suddenly. He had a practice in New York City, and Nicholas Gonzalez, and he studied all of his cases, and he's a medical doctor, was into research, and now has had his own cancer practice, helping people, supporting their bodies with cancer. And he said truly that what he found is that different people respond different ways. Here was a person that could not get well with a alkaline diet, total alkaline, which is all vegetarian pretty much, but total meat is total acid. And we can talk about the acid-alkaline balance in a minute, but that is what he found out was that meat brought this young lady back. So what he discovered then in his practice, he came up with about 10 or 11 different types of diets, combinations from total raw to total raw, and total vegetarian to total meat,
and just meat,
and all in between. And most of the population kind of fits in that middle. But what I always start people off in terms of that, or in terms of what I tell about advice, is that lean proteins, nuts, fruits, vegetables, and salads. You know, I mean, easy on the carbohydrates, but you know, bread is the staff of life. We all love bread, and so anyway, so that's kind of the way I try to steer people to start with as they're going through the process of learning what works for their body. Okay. Some people do great on raw. Some people don't have the digestive integrity to break down the raw foods always, so they're compromised. And when you can't supply the body with the appropriate nutrition or the appropriate fuel, because what we're doing is we're taking fuel in and we're masticating it and we're digesting it in the stomach. We're breaking it down so the body has to digest it. It has to be absorbed, utilized, transferred into the cells. If we're not meeting our needs in certain types of foods and getting the energy of what we need, the body will gravitate to more simple types of foods to get into the body, to get energy. And that's generally sugar, caffeine, and the like, and sweets, because we're looking for the quick pick-me-up. Because the body can't somehow, because we're eating standing up, we're eating on the run, the body cannot convert, which brings us into a whole other field, which is the sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system, which is very interesting. And the sympathetic dominant is fight or flight. That's when the lion is chasing you and you have to get out of the way.
You gotta get going, you're running.
So all the blood comes out of the digestive area and goes into the muscles, into the heart, to pump that blood, goes into the muscles so we can run, goes into the brain and the eyes so we can see and be alert, you know, our heightened senses. But then when the stress is over, then the parasympathetic nervous system comes in. And then the blood comes back into the more of the abdominal region, into the digestive areas of the body, the stomach and the liver and the kidneys, so that we can process food. That's where rest comes in. We can relax. That's the parasympathetic nervous system. This is the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. The relax is where we can digest, we can take a rest. Now, if we're driving the freeways of the city, or we're worried about our relationships, or our money, or our job, which is, you know, the family, which is an ongoing process, it locks us into habitual secretion of the pituitary hypothalamus area, sending signals that we're in stress to the adrenal glands that sit on top of the kidneys in the low back. And the adrenal glands secrete cortisol. You may have heard of cortisone, of cortate creams. Yeah. Cortisol is our natural anti-inflammatory. It's life-preserving, life-saving. But when the stress is over with, it's supposed to send a signal back up here to say, we're doing fine.
We're calm now. We can
quit secreting.
Settle down. Yeah.
That's right. But when there's an ongoing stress, we have a way of habituating into that stress pattern.
So is that how adrenal fatigue comes around?
And that's how adrenal fatigue comes around. And the cortisol, which starts off as a wonderful protective anti-inflammatory, we wouldn't be here without it. If it's habitually in the blood all the time, because we adapt to the stress and say, are you stressed? Oh no, I'm fine. You ask people, I'm fine.
Everyone, they probably think everyone's stressed all the time. So everyone's like, we're good. We're
That's
good.
right.
Yeah.
But when that cortisol is flowing around the system and we have habitual stress, then it affects every parts of our metabolism. From sleep patterns to weight gain, weight loss, to calcium metabolism, to our immunity. We have more allergies, we're more sensitive. We don't lay down a healthy gut lining because the secretory IgA cells are depressed, and that's what builds the healthy gut lining. You've heard the term leaky gut, maybe?
I have. I'm not familiar that much with it. But
yeah, so when people are under stress, the liver, which helps to detoxify our body of heavy metals naturally, it's an enzyme called metallothionein enzyme, which helps us detox heavy metals, among other things. The liver is compromised because there's a tension and a tightness in all smooth muscle tissue when there's high cortisol levels in the blood. And one of the largest areas of smooth muscle tissue is in the liver and biliary tree. So we digest fats, the bile in the liver, and so the liver is our major detox organ system. But the kidneys are kind of the washing machine of the blood. So whatever the liver can't handle, then it'll send down in the blood. The kidneys have to take over, and it stresses the kidneys. So there's this whole stress process going on that even that's affected.
It's kind of a chain reaction.
Yes.
Like dominoes fall.
A domino. And another interesting piece is that cholesterol, which is always it's the booger bear of the...
There's good and bad cholesterol.
There's good and bad cholesterol, but we have to have cholesterol. We have to have it in every cell in our body, in the membrane, and in our brain, and it coat our nervous system, the myelin sheath, as part of the process, I think. I got that right. But cholesterol is the mother molecule of all the hormones, both male and female. Estrogen, testosterone, androstenedione, that's what they give the athletes. There was a big thing with baseball players using these hormones to build up,
Beef up.
Beef up, exactly. And all that comes from cholesterol as the mother molecule of those hormones. Now, when an individual is under stress, not only can we not produce a healthy hormonal response, so the control system for the pharmacy in our brain is not working properly, but we're taking all of that pregnenolone, the cholesterol goes to pregnenolone, into progesterone and cortisol and DHEA, but we have what is known under stress as a cortisol steal. So rather than going into a healthy hormone process, it shunts off into the cortisol because we're under stress and the body needs that stress hormone. So it's the cortisol steal. So stress is huge. It was the first seminar I ever took when I came out of school. Graduated from the University of Houston with a degree in human nutrition and food. And when I came out of school, it was this. I took a workshop in the adrenals, adrenal stress. That's how I found out this. It just opened up an entire world for me to understand how stress affects our health and metabolism. And I remember, our parents telling us, stress, oh, you don't even know what stress is. I will tell you about stress. We had to walk to school. We lived in a depression. You don't know what stress. Well, sitting in front of the TV set too much is too much stress. Anything can be stressful if we do it to an excessive amount. So stress plays a huge role in affecting our health.
So then what kind of general solutions could you provide for people who just, let's say, constantly feel overworked, burnt out, like they can't handle any more on their plate, but yet someone keeps on plopping down more food? What do you suggest?
That's where we have to kind of be in the world but not of the world. In the world means that you are chopping wood, carrying water, doing your chores, providing for yourself, making a living, being with family and relationships and job, etc., and life, enjoying life. But saving a little bit of that awareness in self-observation for yourself, and kind of turn your attention towards you and observe your movements in the world. And when you begin to get upset, begin to notice that. And the first process towards that, you know, I'd say after drinking water and being hydrated, is to breathe. It's portable. It goes everywhere you go.
You can find it everywhere.
You can find it everywhere. It's the easiest, it's the quickest, it's the most powerful medicine that we have in our body. And if you look at the holotrophic breathing, if you look in the early days of Stanislaus Grof, if I'm not pronouncing, I'm butchering his name, but he started the rebirthing movement. Leonard Orr. You have people now. Gilliland did holotropic breathing.
Here at the ranch.
Here at the ranch, at ECETI, and then also who's the other fellow that Eric Raines is coming up in the world now. He's a very popular young man who is setting things on fire with breathing techniques and qigong and exercises, and how we can mitigate and sometimes heal areas in our body through our breath, through breathing into them. It's fascinating, but it starts with us breathing,
just letting go
of everything, just for a couple of seconds. Just for, maybe even you can't do it for a couple of seconds, do it for a millisecond, because then the mind will pick up the story again. The mind is always trying to solve all of our problems, and so we're doing all the time. And you've heard people say, well, we're doing on ourselves all the time. You're right. Instead of being. And the first question, well, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to get things done if I'm being all the time? Well, if you can afford, 5 minutes twice a day, that's a start.
Just to quiet your mind.
Just to quieten your mind, open your heart, so that you can begin to listen to what is coming through in the intuitive guidance system that's walking with us all the time. So we think that we have to take charge, seize the moment, be aggressive all the time.
Always go.
Go. But I think today we're moving into a different process now, a different time, different awareness, so that we're beginning to tune in to ourselves more and letting go a little bit of the urgency. And that's the part of that's the part of beginning to tap into our own stillness inside. And when we do that, a whole world opens up to us. But we have not been taught, we have not been nurtured to trust that process, because the way the world is right now,
it's programmed in a particular way that is very structured and quite rigid.
Eons of programming. And so it's not easy to break free of that process. So, but it takes, if you spend 5 minutes a day, it's like taking your mind. You cannot cut your head off to stop thought, okay? That's not practical, right? So, but if you take your breath and body to the gym, to the meditation gym, or to the sitting stillness gym, if you don't want to call it meditation. Back in the old days with the church, you couldn't call it meditation.
They probably wouldn't.
But now they even have yoga classes. I mean, who would have thought?
The times are changing.
Times are changing.
Certainly.
Huge change. So, but when you take your mind and your breath to your body temple, to the gym, 5 minutes a day. And to the gym, meaning it's just a metaphor, not to the gym, but a metaphor in your place of sitting, quiet, outdoors, wherever you find it. You begin to train this It takes training. It takes working out in the mind gym, so to speak. Just like when you do a yoga posture and say, oh my God, I can't get in there. My knees won't work. My back is...
Body doesn't bend that way.
Yeah, my body doesn't bend that way.
You practice it, and sure enough, eventually
within
you'll be
10
able to
days or 2 weeks, oh, that's interesting. I was able to go a little further. I was actually able to hold this for a count of 1 or 2 or 3.
You'll start acclimating to that new...
Totally.
New way.
And when that happens, you start finding, oh, you know, there was a little space. You know, I created maybe a couple of seconds of space in there where I was just aware, but I wasn't chattering. The brain, which is, and this is kind of an interesting process to lead into to how we save energy to make change, because in order to make a shift, we have to acquire a special kind of energy. And it comes from the Gurdjieff school, and Al Spensky wrote a book in Search of the Miraculous, something about if you save up a little bit of energy each day, it will eventually move you into an octave, a new cycle, something not higher, not lower, but just into a new perception, in a sense. And what happens is the brain, which is about 2 to 3 pounds, right, but requires maybe 25% of the body's energy. And when we are working on a problem, we might work on a problem for 15, 20 minutes and then say, okay, I'm tired of thinking about this. So you go up and you save your work and close the file and put it away. I'm not going to think about that anymore. But then all of a sudden, next 2 or 3 minutes or next 40 minutes, whatever, you're going through the day, and all of a sudden the file opens up by itself, and you start running it, and you're running it like you're chewing old chewing gum that's lost its flavor, and you know it's not sweet anymore, and you finally discover after 30 or 45, oh, my mouth is, my jaws are sore, it tastes like, spit this out. So it's kind of the same thing with thoughts. So this is a wastage of energy, and we need this precious energy. So every time we discover that we are chattering a little bit, it's not about making a schedule. You make a schedule out and you say, I'm going to go to the doctor on Tuesday, or I'm going to go shopping on Wednesday at 3 o'clock, and you put that on your calendar, it's done. I'm talking about more of life issues of how it's going to happen. When is it going to happen? What's going to happen to me?
Like anxiety and being anxious about the future.
Where did I come from? Where am I going? Which we all have those problems. And as we think about that and work that over and over and over, it's like we're at a big dam of energy, and there's leaks. It's just leaking out of us. So every time we discover, through sitting and doing a little meditation for 5-10 minutes a day, we build that into a practice. All of a sudden we start catching ourselves faster when we're carrying a story, an old story, and they're generally boring old stories. We've repeated it 1,000 times. We repeat it to friends. We repeat it to parents. We repeat it to
ourselves, especially too, right?
To ourselves.
Until we change our own story about ourselves, nothing else around us will change.
Exactly. And we have we have life experience, and at first there's you and the tree, and for a millisecond, there's no thought. There's just the tree, and then all of a sudden, the explainer comes in. The interpreter comes in. Oh, that's a beautiful tree. Oh, that's a lovely tree. Oh, I want to show, let me take a picture of that tree. I want to show others about that tree. I want to talk about that tree. Sometimes, same thing happens in a bad experience. We have an experience, then we start explaining, how did that happen to me? What caused it? How did I attract it? How did it get to me? What happened in this incident? And then we start building a story around it. And the story begins, in some cases, it expands. And then it becomes like a ball and a chain. We're carrying this heavy weight. Everywhere we're going, we're telling our stories. And we're not telling it out loud, we're telling it in here. So every time you turn your attention towards that and you catch yourself, whoa, I'm carrying a story, you just put your finger in that dike of loss of energy. And then you start building up this quality of energy. And so you go to bed with 0, you wake up with 100 units of energy, and through the day, you disperse depletes. But maybe you caught yourself a few times. You say 5 units of energy. So you go to bed with 5 units of energy, and you wake up with 105.
More than you had the day before.
Exactly.
And it'll keep on rolling and rolling and
then all of a sudden, boom, it'll either attract something into your life. It will move you into a different space, a different octave, then life begins to change. And the universe, normally the universe will conspire with you. And if you're kind of heading in the right direction, if you're not paying attention, the universe will conspire in a different way. It's right there with you.
It's still with you.
But it may not be as comfortable as you expect. It might be a more of a challenge to deal with. And we don't have, in that sense, challenges in life. The approach is far more important than the solution to a challenge or a problem. So in the approach is the solution. So we have a challenge. So what is your approach? What is my approach? What is anyone's approach? Are we up here in this sympathetic dominant process trying to find an answer, think about an answer? Or are we sitting, relaxing, and paying attention to the internal processes, to our heart? And when this quiets down, this gets louder. Well, wait a minute, let me rephrase that. This doesn't get any louder. It's not going to scream. All it does, it's there all the time speaking to us. But when this is too loud, we can't hear this. So when we get quiet, and settle down, then we can hear the intuitive guidance. Then we kind of, with that approach, then in the quietening comes the solution, so to speak. So the J. Krishnamurti, I'm paraphrasing J. Krishnamurti. The way you approach the problem affects the outcome. The approach is far more important than
well, it's just the foundation to find the solution, right?
Exactly. And he says in life, you hit the ball, the other person hits the ball back, you hit the ball, and it just keeps kind of this process going. And then the solution evolves out of that. Which reminds me of another book called Busting Loose from the Money Game, which is a powerful book. I would recommend that to anybody about how to go about life. It takes total, it's a 90-degree turn. It's
perfect because we're on the show 90-degree turns. So right. I'll definitely put the link down in the bio for the book there. Wonderful. Well, could you maybe tell me about, well, there's a lot of different topics that you have knowledge on and that you tend to, I feel, talk about. I mean, because you encompass wellness as a whole. Is there anything that you'd like to talk about with us and share with our audience that you don't typically talk about but you find to be pretty important and something you'd like to share?
Well, it goes back to that mind-body connection and how our stress levels affects the physiology of the body. And so I think that's still the most important to me. It starts with the body. It starts with taking care of the temple, which means what we eat, what we think, what we drink, and what we do. That comes from one of my mentor doctors, Dr. Russell Jaffe. And the thinking, if we underline the thinking of that process, then that means that as we begin to turn our attention and self-observe, we begin to see and hear what's running in our minds. And then the noticing of it is the ending of it, okay?
It's the awareness. You brought awareness to what you're saying.
You say, how do you stop the thought? Well, turn your attention towards it. The minute you see it.
But then couldn't someone say that once they turn their attention towards that thought, then they become very obsessive about that one, whatever that thought is? It could be the exact opposite, couldn't it?
Yeah, that's the observer seeing the observed. You have to watch the observed. Yes, that all of it will come about in the process of awareness and paying attention. Because if you notice, okay, now I'm overthinking, I'm over watching, I'm over observing. But in that, and if it's constantly going on, then there's a deeper issue in the sense that you need a little bit of assistance with that. So you go to professionals. Some people do body work. Some people do energy work. Some people do
maybe just therapy,
hypnotherapy, talking. And back in the old days in Germany, and according to Michael Tessarian, looking back at just what would happen if a person just sat down with a practitioner and was able to share their story. Not looking for a drug or a cure, just talking it out. And not by pointing, a finger at the individual saying, oh, this is happening, this happened. Just let them talk. Beautiful theory. So getting back to the important process, I was thinking about that. One is, basic things that take care of the body. And if there's emotional trauma, if there is a foundational piece that you feel like keeps coming up unresolved, then one needs to go through it. The way out is the way in. The way in is the way through.
And what do you mean by that when you say go through it?
It means that you have to be able to be willing to experience it fully without a solution. It's a very powerful, it's called self-inquiry. It's something that I've picked up along the way that seems to work very well with stuck problems. I mean, there's people that do the tapping, there's all kind of emotional release work, NET, but I found that if a person will experience the process totally and not tell the story of it, but get to the feeling of it, just feel what's there and then take that feeling deeper.
So kind of relive it, you're saying?
Well, if you
consciously relive it,
it's not it's reliving it only or bringing it up, remembering it only to the point of being able to access the feeling. Now, a lot of people in this, when I work with people on this process, a lot of them get caught up wanting to tell me the story. I don't want to hear the details. I don't want to hear the story. That's mine, building it.
It's your mind talking. It's
the
just
mind
chatter.
And it's building an explanation around the incident. What I want to go back to is the feeling. What is it? The gut. They talk about the biome now. It's the gut. They've got a fancy name for it, the microbiome now. But it's just the gut, our gut instinct, our gut feeling. When we get into that emotional piece, is where that is back in the gut. When we are willing to feel what's there, the hurt, and then go all the way through it without running from it, without trying to stop it, without trying to find a solution to it, without trying to solve it in any way, and see what's there, move through that, and go see if there's anything underneath that. And then you take that deeper into another feeling. And you might start off with anger, and then you might start off with sadness, and you might start off with guilt and shame and judgment and doubt and fear and worry and anger. All of those things we internalize, right? Because we think we're supposed to be more than who we are coming out of the womb, so to speak. And so mommy and daddy, who are God to us, so to speak, because that's all we know, and they tell us, and we live according to their patterns, and society helps us to grow up. And if we get caught up in an incident, and nobody else is judging us, we'll pull our own whip, and we'll start
hurting our own
I should have done better. I should have done it. I should have done that. You should all over yourself. You heard about that, right? So in that process, the guilt, the shame, the judgment, the doubt, the worry, and the fear all have to be let go of. We have to love ourselves. And that's first and foremost. So if there's anything that, that's the main message, because that's what none of us, we got to be better. We got to do something more, as opposed
never
to
satisfied.
Yeah, as opposed to being, and just taking a breath.
The name of our species itself, human being, right? I mean, we're not human doing. We're not human doers, although we do things. Fundamentally, we're human beings, which is quite important to understand.
Yes.
Would you say that as people go through this process of, let's say they're in a really hard spot and they want to consciously go through it and change and work on themselves because they want to change their life around, right?
Yes.
Would you say that while they're going through that process, that their consciousness is changing as they're going through it?
Oh yes. No, absolutely. And it starts with, I remember Jordan Peterson is he's becoming very, very popular in Canada. He's a psychologist, a professor in psychology, and people go to him, mostly kids, but also adults that come to him for advice. And he says, well, that, you know, one of his, in his books and some of his programs, that well, what can they do? He said, well, you can start by cleaning up your room. You know, what does your room look like? What does your car look like? You know, start with some basics of getting some structure in one's life, because that's all part of. That's a metaphor for starting with your environment, and then you can take a look at your diet, because too much of the wrong kinds of foods affect cravings and affect the way we think. You have to have healthy foods in order to have produce a tempo that is producing the right acid, alkaline, positive, negative, ion, ohms and offs, the electrolytes, balance in the body, the food to think clearly, to sleep well, to handle stress. I mean, all of that requires a certain fuel in order to be able to live in these houses. And if we're creating tremendous stress out of our diet and our lifestyle, staying up too late, watching too much TV, spending time in overhead lights. I mean, the light is a very powerful process. The pineal gland, in the early morning sun, the pineal gland, the sun hitting the iris of the eye produces melatonin. Then at night, through darkness, absolute dark, the darker the better, a totally dark room triggers the release of melatonin from the pineal gland. So if we have a lighted dial in our room, we have a night light going on, if it's not a low blue light, because that's another becoming very popular in today's the science world and the health world, is the blue light. Too much exposure to blue light. You look at your computer screen at night or TV at night before you go to bed, it tells the pineal gland, don't secrete melatonin. We're not going to bed tonight. we want to stay up later.
And that's why people suggest, if you're going to go to sleep, or when you go to sleep rather, you stop looking at your phone or any technological devices, like at least like an hour before, so you can start kind of getting into that. Your body will start like, okay, it's dark outside, probably going to start winding down and going to bed.
You start lowering the lights, you know. Some people even wear the blue light blocking glasses, and have for the cell phones have screens, even for the TV sets that do a lot of TV watching.
And some phones are able to actually, they have a blue light off setting, so you can kind of tone it down too.
It's becoming more, you know.
People are more aware of it now, which is really important.
Exactly.
We're always around technology, and
yeah.
day-to-day lives we're kind of bombarded with tech and screens all the time.
Yeah, I saw a Joe Rogan interview with Elon Musk.
Saw that one.
Talking about AI, and boy,
it was really interesting.
That's right, exactly.
It was definitely interesting, and AI is, it's coming. It's on. It's already here. Honestly, it's on its way.
But it will not be able to outthink the brain, or bring in our intuitive processes. So it starts with.
It can only do what it's programmed to do.
That's it.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the soul and the human spirit is.
Well, but it can
within.
be. That's right, and it can be creative. It can do a lot of things. AI, but yes, you're right.
Well, thank you so much for coming on to our show. I'm sure our audience definitely has learned a lot. We'd love to have you on again if you'd like.
Absolutely.
And we'll definitely put your information if you'd like to speak with Mr. Douglas Fleckman. Then just check out the links I'll put down in the bio here. Thank you so much once again. And
pleasure.
I hope you have a wonderful day enjoying it on ECETI's ranch here in Washington. Thank you so much.
Thank you.